Helping and Healing is the title of this final video workshop in our series, Christians and Depression. And Dr. Lockley begins with the answer to the puzzle that he set at the end of the previous workshop.
Welcome to our fourth session of the seminar on Christians and Depression. You've had the hard bit. That was the last session. I've said some very uncomfortable things. I hope that it came across that I said them in love. I don't mean them to be unfairly or inappropriately critical. I just want to make sure that we all, as Christians, know the traps that we can fall into, unfortunately, and to try to steer clear of them where at all possible. I do think that's important. We're going to talk about how to help, how to be the hands of Jesus, how to be the mouth of Jesus, how to bless, how to encourage, how to help with the healing. I left you with a puzzle. What's the next number in the series? Anybody got any good ideas? 21, yeah. It's actually a thing called a Fibonacci series, and it's formed by having each one of the numbers as being the sum of the ones before. So 1 and 1 is 2, 1 and 2 is 3, 2 and 3 is 5, etc., etc., etc. Very good. Not quite easy to spot, actually. Wonder what would have happened if you'd have only had the middle ones. 2, 3, 5, and 8. I think if you'd have seen it immediately, you'd have said the next number is going to be 12, because the difference between each of them is going up by 1 each time. 2 from 3 is 1, 3 from 5 is 2, 5 from 8 is 3, 8, 4, 12. Okay. That is really quite like our understanding of the Bible. If we think of the central bit, the 2, 3, 5, 8, a bit like somebody who knows the Gospels and some of the letters, all the good bits, but doesn't really know the Old Testament and doesn't necessarily know it in context, then it's a bit like having those numbers in yellow. And unfortunately, because you don't have the information, you will then infer an incorrect answer. And you will confidently say, oh, the answer's 12, when the answer actually isn't 12. And had you had a wider amount of information, you'd have got a better answer. Why is this important? Because it's all about Christian maturity. And Christian maturity is intimately built into the business of getting over a depression. Maturity is what you achieve, at least in part, when you get through a depression. It's learning the lessons, not the easy lessons, the difficult ones. Learning how the ends of the information fit in, so that you don't just see the Bible from a little narrow spectrum, you see the whole breadth of it. And you fit it in, and you understand it, and you can communicate it, and you can communicate it better in that way. I want to reprise some of the things that we've talked before, just so that we can remind ourselves of the importance of certain aspects of it. To start off, it's important if you're dealing with somebody who is depressed to make sure that depression is the diagnosis. It's very easy to miss it, even for doctors. And I can tell you that we, in the medical profession, will often discuss among ourselves whether a patient is or is not depressed. It is not very obvious in certain cases. And sometimes you go along and you think, oh, they've got such and such and such and such and such and such, and somebody who hasn't seen the patient at all comes in 3 months down the line and says, you sure they're not depressed? You think, yeah, missed that. So getting the diagnosis right is actually very important and not easy. My own depression, I think, was misunderstood as anxiety when I first went into it, because I had such an element of anxiety involved. And it was only afterwards that the real iceberg underneath emerged. As we said before, get the cause right. There is no point at all in treating somebody's depression with intensive counselling if actually it's their thyroid that is not producing enough of the thyroxine hormone that is necessary to keep everybody ticking over properly. Treat any physical conditions. That means anything other than the depressive situation psychologically. Treat things, as we've said, like thyroxine deficiency, and anything that comes up. There are a whole host of things, if you remember, that can cause depression, and that those things need specific treatment. There's no point in giving antidepressants. And not too much point in giving counselling, though counselling can be very helpful in a situation if you have somebody who is overburdened with difficulties in coping. And having somebody to be able to offload to and to be able to share the problems with, even if it is a physical problem, is actually very important. So I'm not saying you can't use it. What I'm saying is that what you have to do is to go for the specific treatment for the cause of the depression, and also treat any fallout that occurs on the way, as it were. Medicines. We've dealt with this already. It is so important to take the tablets if the doctor wants you to have them. It's important, too, to remember that there are side effects to tablets. Some medicines that suit one person will not suit another, and vice versa. And there are all sorts of side effects that each antidepressant can produce. And all you have to do, with a bit of luck, is just swap the patient onto a different set of antidepressants, and hopefully the side effects will be at least ameliorated or even go away completely. Sometimes they don't go away completely. Sometimes one needs to give other things in order to stop the secondary effects occurring. But that is for the doctor to sort out. We've already talked about psychotherapy and counselling. It's important to make sure that people do have counselling when they need it, and psychotherapy when they need it. As we said earlier, there are various levels. Giving advice is something counsellors don't like to think of themselves as doing that. The process of counselling isn't about saying, you should do this. It's about getting alongside the person and saying, how do you feel? And helping them sort out their problems and getting their own answers, while at the same time being there to be alongside them. And the techniques of using psychotherapy and counselling and psychoanalysis are different, but they're all in a big, big spectrum of helping the patient sort themselves out. We've talked about dealing with stress and how important it is to get rest, and also how important exercise is. Let's go on to some of the things that you can really do to help yourself in some other areas. A lot of people who are depressed are actually not very assertive. They wouldn't say boo to a goose. This is actually made worse because of some of the teachings by the church, which are not always applied properly. And the idea that is often promulgated of a Christian turns the other cheek. Well, there are times when a Christian should turn the other cheek. But there are times when the Christian should not and should be assertive. Being assertive is not about being a bully. Being assertive is about knowing what you want and asking for it, because you have a right in society to be listened to. Firstly, know what you want. The example I often give is of a person who has had a meal served in a restaurant that isn't hot enough. The meal comes, it's cold. The non-assertive person just eats it and then pays and gives a tip, and hates himself for doing that, but doesn't feel he can do anything else because he doesn't want to appear different. The assertive person will turn around and say, waiter, my food is cold. I'd like you to replace it with a hot meal, please. So know what you want. My food is cold, I would like it, please, to be replaced. Ask for it directly. My food is cold, please will you get me a hot meal? There are so many people who are non-assertive, and they don't ask like that. What they say is, excuse me, waiter, my food, I'm sorry to trouble you, but it's not very nice, really. Well, what's wrong with it? Nobody else has complained. Oh, all right. And the final thing about assertiveness is, don't be deviated. Nobody else has complained. I don't care if nobody else has complained. My food's cold. I want a proper meal. I paid for it. It's my right. You don't have to be nasty about it. You can be very nice about it. And you can say thank you at the end. Thank you for being so helpful. And if the person is being awkward, nobody else has complained, well, I'd like my food to be made hot. Well, I'm not going to do it. Could I see the manager? Manager's off today. Who is the manager? You know, and you go on like that until you find an address to write to, and then you write to it, etc. That's what the assertive person does. The non-assertive person won't ask properly, won't ask for it directly, gets deviated, doesn't get what is his right and due, and hates himself for it at the end and feels small and insignificant, and that just adds to his depression. Assertiveness is not about being a bully. Bullies don't know how to be assertive. All they know is how to be bullies when they want their own way. They don't know how to ask for it properly. So almost back to the screen that we were talking about earlier, about anger. The person who is angry doesn't know how to handle it, and it comes out as rage when provoked. The person who doesn't know how to be assertive is the person who ends up as a bully, because he doesn't know how to ask for things in a civil way, in a civil society. Very important that Christians aren't good at being assertive. It's the turn the other cheek syndrome. There is a time and a place to be assertive as a Christian. One of the rules that I personally follow is this. If somebody insults you or hurts you, then it may well be for you to forgive, but society to deal with it. Okay? So if your daughter has been raped, then you may have to go through a process of forgiveness for the person concerned, but it may be for society to put that person in prison. And that, I think, indicates the difference between the sort of turn the other cheek and let everybody walk all over you syndrome, which unfortunately so often comes from the pulpit, not intentionally, but, you know, unintentionally. And what I believe to be the true way that Christ would deal with the situation. Because you see, as has been very forcibly pointed out to me recently, there are times when God is blazing mad. And I think we are right to be blazing mad on his behalf. And there is a time and a place for Christians to bang their fists on the table and say, thus far and no further, you are not doing this anymore. I am not allowing it. Jesus did this when he made a whip and drove the money changers out of the temple. Thus far and no further. We as emissaries of God, I think, have to learn carefully when to say we have to forgive and when to say thus far and no further. And it requires a lot of maturity to do it, but getting the balance right is important. And if you don't get it right, you end up with people feeling got at by the whole world with no means of getting back, no means of asserting themselves, no means of having any status in the world at all. And psychologically speaking, that really disempowers people and makes them very prone to depression. It's important to deal with anger in depression. Oh, but I'm not angry, I'm depressed. You'll find most people, well, many people with depression say. Psychologically speaking, depression is interned aggression, where somebody would like to say something but can't. Now, sometimes this is because the person they are angry with is above them and has authority over them in the office, work, where, whatever. Sometimes it's because they feel they can't be angry because it's not a Christian's right or duty to be angry, which is what we've just been talking about. But it is, on certain occasions, the right thing to do. Dealing with the assertiveness side of things is vital. You need a mature approach to Christianity to know when to be truly assertive, truly angry. so that the aggression goes because you've dealt with it, because you feel complete that things have happened. Say you're in a queue and somebody has just barged in, say, excuse me, can I just pay for the train? I'm late for the train. You know, you don't mind, do you? Well, the answer might, you know, if you don't do anything, you might just go home and get frustrated beyond belief because you've been made 10 minutes late and now you've missed something and you didn't pick up that phone call and the kids were waiting on the step and, and then you kick the cat because you're fed up. And that's because there's been a knock-on effect from the lack of assertiveness. And what you really need under those circumstances is to be able to say, yes, I do mind, but if your need is greater than mine, then fine, so be it, you go ahead. But actually, I've got children waiting at home for me, and I don't want to be late for them. So if you don't mind, can we all take our places? And in doing so, you've not got angry. You've said what probably needs saying to somebody who perhaps shouldn't have done what he did. You feel at the end of it you've come out in a way that is honourable, both to you and the person concerned. And you don't feel you're a worm, and you don't feel you've got to kick yourself because you're a worm either. But equally, you haven't done anything which is unchristian. And if you look at what Jesus said, there are so many times when he has said very, very hard things to people. Not, I think, unlovingly, but sometimes things that had to be said. Dealing with anger is also about dealing with anger against God. Why did you allow my child to die? Why did you allow me to have this depression? Why did my wife run off and leave me? Why? You're supposed to be a loving God. Why do you let it happen? Just because you don't say that you're angry doesn't mean that you aren't angry. And God knows that internally you are angry. So there's no point in hiding it from him. It is often very therapeutic, as we have heard on the videos, to learn that you can get angry with God. God is big enough to take it, as one of my friends said. Feel free to be honest with God. He will be honest with you, and he will not kick you back. There's a lovely, lovely verse in Isaiah which Jesus repeated about himself. A bruised reed he will not break. When you are damaged, God understands, and he will not push you. And he will understand when you say, I don't understand. God, how can you let this happen? He knows, and he loves you. And just because you say these things, he's not going to take it out on you. He's not going to throw thunderbolts. Look at what Elijah said. Elijah effectively said, if you really read it, God, you're not going to be able to look after me. And God had looked after him wonderfully. But God didn't mind what Elijah had said because he knew the heart of Elijah. It's interesting, incidentally, that Elijah got his depression as a result of doing God's will. For all those who are depressed, you may well have your depression because you're doing God's will. Not for any other reason. The only reason why Elijah got his depression was because he faithfully followed out what God had been asking him to do, and it was a success, and he was exhausted afterwards. So if you're depressed, you might be up with Elijah, you know. Christians can't be depressed. Elijah was at the Mount of the Transfiguration with Jesus. That says a lot, I think. We've already talked about anger being interned aggression. Another phrase that is important, another verse that's important. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. It doesn't say you shouldn't be angry, does it? In your anger, do not sin. So in other words, handle your anger properly. It's all right, it's okay to be an angry Christian. Just make sure that the reasons for being angry are right and that you are expressing your anger in the right way to the right person. There is no point in expressing it to the cat. And a lot of anger actually does happen like that. Not so much to the cat, but to the children, or to the husband, or to the wife, when things at work or in the school have gone wrong. But you can't take it out on the people who've done it, or you can't find a way to sort it out. And so you go home and you take it out on the people who are more vulnerable, because they're easiest to hit out at. Back to how to help yourself. Emotions, the arts, creativity. We've already dealt a lot with this. I don't think there's too much to say beyond what I've already said, except that it is very positive to be involved in creative processes at whatever level. It is really about what being man is all about. We measure man by the fact that he creates things. And if you look back at archaeology, then you find that people say, oh, here's his cave paintings. Man was here. I want to go on to a very interesting way to look at depression, which I've nicknamed the choke. Think of this as a graph of sadness and happiness. Happiness is at the top, sadness is at the bottom. Most people do this sort of thing. And then something happens, and it threatens to go down. And you can't actually see an end to it. So you keep on going down and down and down and down. And you think, oh dear. And your subconscious thinks, oh dear. And so what it does is it puts a choke on it. And it makes parameters below which your emotions will not go. But at the same time, it puts parameters above which it won't go either. It's a bit like a limiter in electronics. You can't be too sad, but you can't be too happy either. And so you sort of bumble along like this, not being very happy. You know, let's jolly her along. It doesn't really work, and it all crumbles down again. And people help us try and take people like this and say, come on, let's go out to the theatre, let's go out and have a good time, let's go and have a party. Go on, be happy, try and get up to the top here. And it doesn't work because it's the wrong bit. And what you have to do, frightening this, you have to take that choke off. And almost certainly you will go down, but it will not go down forever. And then, because the choke's off, you can then go up again. That is one of the most frightening things you have to do if you are depressed. You have to face your fears, face your gremlins. Don't do it on your own when your best friends have just gone off for the weekend. Hand-holding needed.
We'll take a break now. In part 2, Dr. Lockley will be describing how to help yourself if you're depressed and how to help others with depression.